Don't tell your wife. Those were the last words my best friend ever said to anyone alive. 18 years of marriage destroyed in 47 minutes. I thought I knew Vanessa, thought I understood what love looked like after 2 decades of sharing a bed, a mortgage, a life. But the woman who kissed me goodbye that morning had already decided I needed to die by midnight. Sometimes your friend has to die for you to discover your family wants you dead. Sometimes the people who promise to love you in sickness and in health are the ones planning both the sickness and the death. And sometimes a USB drive becomes the difference between joining your murdered friend in the grave or watching your wife get dragged away in handcuffs. This story has more betrayals than a mob family reunion, and if you're listening from wherever life finds you right now, you're going to want to remember this moment. Hit that subscribe button, because by the time I'm done, you'll understand why trust is the most dangerous thing you can give another person. My name is Thomas Mitchell. I'm 59 years old, recently retired from corporate human resources, and 3 months ago I thought I was living the American dream in suburban Ohio. Perfect house, loving wife, dead best friend who died peacefully of natural causes. I was wrong about everything except the dead friend part. Though it turns out I was wrong about that too. I got the call on a Tuesday. Lawrence Hoffman, David's lawyer, said I needed to come to his office immediately. Something about David's final wishes. My best friend had been dead 3 months, but apparently he still had things to say. Mr. Mitchell, Lawrence said, sliding a USB drive across his mahogany desk. David was very specific about this. He said if anything happened to him, you were to watch this alone. And he emphasized, don't tell your wife. The USB felt heavier than it should have. David Mitchell, my neighbor, my golf partner, my kid's honorary uncle for 2 decades. Heart attack at 58. Sudden, they said. Vanessa cried for days. What's on it? I asked. Lawrence adjusted his glasses. I don't know. David recorded it himself, brought it here sealed. My instructions were simple. If David died under any circumstances, give this to Thomas Mitchell within 90 days. My hands were shaking as I took it. Why the secrecy? David was concerned about something in his final weeks. He seemed to think his life was in danger, from someone close to him. The office felt colder suddenly. Did he say who? Lawrence shook his head. Just that whoever it was had access to his home, his medications, his daily routine. Someone he trusted completely. I thought about Vanessa's tears at the funeral, how she'd gripped my hand during the eulogy, how she'd whispered, Thomas, I don't know what I'll do without him. There's something else, Lawrence continued. David updated his will the week before he died, made some unusual changes, left everything in trust with very specific conditions. What kind of conditions? That's for you to discover. The trust documents are in a safety deposit box. The key is with the USB. He handed me a small brass key. David said you'd understand everything once you watched the recording. He said you were the only one who could protect what he'd worked for. I pocketed both items. How long is the recording? 47 minutes. The drive home felt endless. Vanessa was cooking dinner when I walked in, her famous chicken parmesan, the same meal she'd made every Tuesday for 18 years of marriage. She smiled at me, that warm smile that had made me fall in love with her when I was 41 and stupid enough to think second chances came easy. How was your day, honey? She asked, kissing my cheek. Fine. Just some business with Lawrence about David's estate. Her smile flickered for just a second. Oh? What kind of business? I almost told her, almost showed her the USB. After all, she'd loved David too, hadn't she? She'd been the one to call 911 when we found him collapsed in his kitchen. She'd held his hand in the ambulance. Instead, I said, just paperwork, nothing important. And I went upstairs to my home office, locked the door, and plugged in the USB. The screen flickered, and David's face appeared. He looked terrible, gaunt, exhausted, afraid. This wasn't the David I'd known. This was a man who knew he was going to die. Thomas, he said, looking directly into the camera, if you're watching this, it means I'm dead. And it means someone I trusted killed me. My coffee mug slipped from my hands, shattering on the hardwood floor. I know how that sounds. David Mitchell, paranoid old fool, making accusations from beyond the grave. But Thomas, I have proof, and I need you to act on it. He held up a small bottle. Digoxin, heart medication. I'm supposed to take 0.25 milligrams daily. But look at this bottle. He turned it toward the camera. 0.5 milligrams, double the dose, enough to cause the exact symptoms I've been having. Irregular heartbeat, confusion, fatigue. The timestamp on the video read March 15th, 12:43 p.m., 5 days before David died. Someone's been switching my medication, Thomas. Someone with access to my house. Someone I trust enough to let handle my pills. Someone who knows exactly how to make it look like natural heart failure. I thought about Vanessa's nursing background, how she'd always been so helpful with David's medications after his first heart episode 2 years ago, how she'd organized his pill dispenser every week, making sure he had everything he needed. I've been documenting everything, David continued. Timestamps, photos, medical records. The person doing this thinks they're being clever, but they're leaving a trail. And Thomas, there's more. He shuffled through some papers. My will. I had it drawn up to leave everything to the David Mitchell Foundation for Heart Disease Research. But someone's been pressuring me to change it. They think they deserve a cut. They think they're entitled to my money because of how much they've helped me over the years. My stomach dropped. Vanessa had mentioned several times how David should take care of the people who love him in his will. How it wasn't fair that he was leaving everything to charity when family, meaning us, his closest friends, could use the help. The thing is, David said, his voice growing stronger, I've been playing along. I let them think I was changing the will. I even had Lawrence drop a fake version, leaving substantial amounts to certain people. But the real will, that's locked away where they can't touch it. He leaned closer to the camera. Thomas, I need you to promise me something. When I die, and I will die, probably within days of you watching this, don't let them get away with it. The evidence is all there. Bank records showing unusual activity in my accounts. Medical records showing the dosage changes. Photos of my medication bottles being tampered with. The video cut to a montage of images, bank statements, medical files, photos of pill bottles with different dosages. The level of documentation was staggering. I know you're thinking this is impossible, that the people we trust most couldn't do something so vile. I thought the same thing, Thomas, until I started paying attention. He looked exhausted, defeated. The person doing this isn't just after my money. They're in debt, serious debt, gambling debts that could get them killed if they don't pay up soon. They see my death as their salvation. They think they can forge my will, inherit my estate, and solve all their problems. Gambling debts. My mind raced. Brandon, Vanessa's son from her first marriage, had always been reckless with money, always asking for loans, always promising to pay them back. He'd been around David's house a lot lately, helping with yard work, running errands. The timeline is accelerating, David said. I think they've figured out that I'm suspicious. They've increased the dosage twice in the past week. My heart can't take much more of this. He held up another document. This is my real will, Thomas, the one Lawrence has in his safe. Everything goes to the foundation, just as I originally planned, but I've added a codicil. If my death is proven to be murder, I want the perpetrator prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I don't want forgiveness. I don't want understanding. I want justice. The camera zoomed in on his eyes. They were filled with sadness, not anger. Thomas, I'm trusting you with this because you're the only one who hasn't asked me for money. You're the only one who hasn't hinted that I should take care of my loved ones financially. You loved me for who I was, not what I could give you. He paused, collecting himself. There's a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box 447. The key is with this USB. Inside you'll find copies of everything. The real will, all the medical evidence, financial records showing the gambling debts, even photos of the medication switching in progress at 447. I wrote it down, my hands shaking. When you get the evidence, take it to Detective Amy Reynolds at the police department. I've already spoken with her about my concerns. She's been investigating financial elder abuse cases. She'll know what to do. David smiled sadly. I'm sorry to burden you with this, old friend, but I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let my death be meaningless. The video ended abruptly. I sat in silence for several minutes, processing what I'd just seen. Then I heard Vanessa calling from downstairs. Thomas, dinner's ready. I looked at the USB in my hand, then at the key. But first, I needed to know what else David had discovered about Brandon's gambling problem. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to First National Bank. The safety deposit box required 2 keys, mine and the bank's. Inside, I found exactly what David had promised, a manila folder thick with documents that would destroy the life I thought I knew. The first document was a private investigator's report. David had hired someone to follow Brandon for 3 weeks. The photos showed him at underground poker games, illegal betting operations, meeting with what the report called known associates of organized crime. Total debt, $287,000. The second document was a detailed log of medication tampering. David had set up a hidden camera in his bathroom. The photos were damning. Clear images of someone entering his house with a key, switching his pill bottles, carefully adjusting dosages. Someone wearing Vanessa's nursing badge from Regional Medical Center. My wife of 18 years was slowly murdering my best friend. The third document was a copy of the forged will. It left David's entire $4.1 million estate to be divided equally between me, Vanessa, and Brandon. I would have received over $1 million from my best friend's death. The thought made me nauseous. But the fourth document was the worst. It was a life insurance policy on David's life, purchased 6 months ago. Beneficiary, Vanessa Mitchell. Amount, $1.5 million. She'd been planning this for half a year. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot, reading through evidence of my wife's plan to commit murder. The investigator's report included transcripts of recorded phone calls between Vanessa and Brandon. He's getting suspicious, Vanessa's voice said in one transcript. We need to accelerate the timeline. How much longer? Brandon asked. The increased dosage should do it within a week, maybe less. His heart's already showing signs of stress. What about Thomas? He's always over there. Thomas won't suspect anything. He trusts me completely. Besides, he'll be grateful for the inheritance. He's been struggling since his early retirement. That was 3 days before David died. I called Detective Reynolds and set up a meeting for that afternoon. Then I went home and tried to act normal. Vanessa was in the kitchen preparing lunch, humming softly to herself. The same woman who had once nursed me through pneumonia, who had held me when my father died, who had promised 18 years ago to love and cherish me in sickness and in health. You're quiet today, she said, not looking up from her sandwich preparation. Just thinking about David, missing him. She nodded sympathetically. I know, honey. I miss him too. He was such a generous man, always thinking about others. Generous. She was calling him generous while she'd slowly poisoned him for his money. Vanessa, I said carefully, did David ever mention changing his will recently? Her hand paused on the butter knife, just for a second. Why do you ask? Lawrence mentioned something about updates to his estate planning. She resumed making the sandwich, but her movements were more deliberate now. David never discussed his personal finances with me. You know that. It was a lie. The investigator's report included photos of Vanessa and Brandon meeting with someone who appeared to be a document forger. They'd planned to contest the real will using their fake version. I was just wondering if he'd mentioned taking care of his friends. You know, people who'd been there for him. Vanessa smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with. Thomas, you're too good, always thinking about what others might do for you instead of what you deserve. What I deserved. The phrase sent chills down my spine. Actually, she continued, I wouldn't be surprised if David left us something. We were like family to him, and Brandon's been so helpful around his house this past year. Brandon, who needed $287,000 to stay alive. Brandon, who had helped his mother increase the dosage of heart medication until it became lethal. My phone rang. Detective Reynolds, confirming our 3 p.m. meeting. Who was that? Vanessa asked. Work. Some paperwork I need to handle. She nodded and handed me a sandwich. Ham and Swiss, your favorite. I took a bite, wondering if I'd ever be able to trust food she prepared again, wondering if she'd already moved on to her next target. Then I noticed something that made my blood freeze. A small bottle of prescription medication on the kitchen counter, partially hidden behind the coffee maker. But David had found out about more than just the medication switching. At 3 p.m. sharp, I sat across from Detective Amy Reynolds in a small conference room at the police station. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I spread David's evidence across the table like a hand of cards that would win or lose everything. Mr. Mitchell, she said, studying the documents, David contacted me 6 weeks before his death. He was convinced someone was trying to kill him, but he wouldn't name suspects. Now I understand why. She picked up the photos of the medication switching. These are remarkably clear. Hidden camera? Bathroom medicine cabinet. David was thorough. The timestamp shows this photo was taken 2 days before he died. Your wife increased the dosage to 0.75 milligrams. That's triple his prescribed amount. I watched her review the private investigator's report on Brandon's gambling debts. This explains motive. $287,000 to very dangerous people. Well, when did your stepson start having money problems? About 8 months ago, that's when Vanessa started talking about how David should take care of the people who loved him in his will. Detective Reynolds pulled out a thick file. We've been investigating elder financial abuse for 2 years. There's a pattern. Caregiver gains trust, isolates victim, creates financial dependence, then manipulates inheritance documents. But usually they don't escalate to murder. What makes this case different? The timeline. Most financial abuse happens gradually over years. Your wife had to accelerate because of Brandon's debt situation. That made her sloppy. She showed me bank records I hadn't seen before. We've been monitoring unusual activity in David's account since he contacted us. Look at these withdrawals. The statement showed cash withdrawals of $5,000 every Friday for 6 weeks. Always from the ATM at Riverside Casino, where Brandon played high-stakes poker. David was giving Brandon money. No, someone was using David's ATM card. The casino has security footage. She slid a series of photographs across the table. That's Brandon using David's card. And that's your wife in the background, watching to make sure no one noticed. The photos were damning. Vanessa stood near the slot machines while Brandon withdrew money from David's account. They looked comfortable, practiced. This wasn't their first theft. There's more, Detective Reynolds continued. We traced the forged will to a document service in the warehouse district, the same place that's been linked to 3 other inheritance fraud cases this year. She showed me a receipt dated 6 months ago. Payment of $2,500 for estate document preparation, paid with a credit card belonging to Vanessa Mitchell. 6 months, I said slowly. They've been planning this for 6 months. The life insurance policy confirms premeditation. Your wife purchased $1. $5 million in coverage on David's life, naming herself as beneficiary. She told the insurance company she was his domestic partner. Domestic partner? While married to me, while slowly killing the man she claimed to love. What happens now? Detective Reynolds gathered the documents. We need to move fast. If they suspect David left evidence, they might flee, or they might eliminate potential witnesses. The weight of that statement hit me. You think I'm in danger? Mr. Mitchell, you're the primary beneficiary in their forged will. If something happened to you after David's death, Brandon would inherit everything as Vanessa's son. And you have a life insurance policy too, don't you? I did. $850,000 of them through my former employer, beneficiary Vanessa Mitchell. We need to get you somewhere safe while we prepare arrest warrants. Do you have family out of state? Detective, I can't just disappear. If they're planning something, we need to catch them in the act. And she studied my face. What are you suggesting? Use me as bait. Set up surveillance. Let them make their move, but be ready to intervene. That's extremely dangerous, Mr. Mitchell. We're talking about people who've already committed murder. David trusted me to see this through. I won't run. Detective Reynolds was quiet for a long moment. There is a way. We could wire you for sound, set up perimeter surveillance. But you'd have to act completely normal, until they make their move. How long? 48 hours maximum. We'll have arrest warrants by Thursday morning. If they don't try anything by then, we'll move in anyway. She handed me a card. This has my direct number. Any sign of trouble, any change in their behavior, you call immediately. I drove home in a daze. Vanessa was in the garden, planting spring flowers. She looked up and waved as I parked, soil smudged on her cheek, looking like the woman I'd married, not like someone who'd spent months planning a murder. "How was your day?" she called out. "Fine, just running errands." She stood up, brushing dirt off her knees. "Thomas, I've been thinking about David's funeral. How peaceful he looked. I'm glad his suffering is over." Suffering she had caused. Suffering she had orchestrated and monitored and adjusted with clinical precision. "I keep thinking about how quickly it happened," I said, testing the waters. "One day he seemed fine, the next—" "Heart disease is unpredictable," she said. "Even with medication, sometimes there's nothing you can do." Medication she had deliberately tampered with. Medication she had used as a weapon. That night at dinner, Brandon joined us. He seemed unusually relaxed, joking and laughing in ways I hadn't seen for months. The pressure of his debt must have eased considerably. "Uncle David would have loved this," he said, referring to Vanessa's pot roast. "He always said you were the best cook in the neighborhood." Uncle David, who Brandon had helped murder for gambling money. As I watched them talk and laugh, I realized something that made the situation even worse. Then my phone rang, and Brandon's expression changed completely. The call was from Lawrence Hoffman. Brandon's face went white when he heard the lawyer's name. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to see you tomorrow morning. There's been a development with David's estate that requires immediate attention." Vanessa was trying to listen from the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes, but clearly straining to hear every word. "What kind of development?" I asked, louder than necessary. "It seems there are discrepancies between different versions of David's will. The probate court has ordered a full investigation. Can you be here at 9 a.m.? "Of course." After I hung up, the silence in the house was deafening. Brandon had stopped eating. Vanessa had turned off the water and was standing motionless at the sink. "Is there a problem with David's will?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Lawrence didn't say, just mentioned some discrepancies that need to be cleared up." Brandon suddenly pushed back from the table. "I should go. Early day tomorrow." But he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he lingered in the doorway, whispering something to Vanessa that I couldn't quite hear. After he left, she was different. Nervous, distracted, checking her phone every few minutes. At 11 p.m., she said she was going to bed early. All this stress about David's estate is wearing me out. I waited 30 minutes, then crept to our bedroom door. She was on her phone, speaking in hushed tones. "Told you this would happen. Need to accelerate our timeline. Thomas is getting suspicious." I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but her responses made my blood run cold. "Tomorrow night, after he meets with the lawyer." "Yes, the same way. I still have enough left." Enough what left? Enough of whatever drug she planned to use on me? I retreated to my study and called Detective Reynolds' emergency number. "They're planning something for tomorrow night," I whispered, "after my meeting with Lawrence. We're moving the timeline up. Can you get out of the house right now? If I leave, they'll know something's wrong. They'll run." "Mr. Mitchell, they're planning to kill you. Tonight." "Then let's catch them doing it." 2 hours later, I was fitted with a wire so thin I couldn't feel it. Detective Reynolds and 3 other officers would be positioned around my house. Additional units would monitor all exits from the neighborhood. "Remember," she said, "we need them to incriminate themselves on tape. Get them talking about David. Get them talking about their plans. But the moment you feel unsafe, you say the code word Oklahoma, and we'll be inside in 30 seconds. I went home at 2 a.m. Vanessa was supposedly asleep, but I noticed her breathing was too controlled, too even. She was awake, listening. The next morning felt like performing in a play where everyone knew the ending except me. Vanessa made breakfast, eggs over easy, just the way I liked them. She was unusually affectionate, kissing my cheek, asking about my plans for the day. "Lawrence wants to see me at 9, I said. "Something about David's will." "I'm sure it's nothing serious. David loved you like a brother. Whatever he left you, you deserve it." whatever he left me. She still believed their forged will would hold up. At Lawrence's office, I learned the rest of David's plan. He had anticipated that his killers would try to use a forged will, so he'd left instructions for Lawrence to delay probate for exactly 60 days, long enough for the USB evidence to be discovered and acted upon. The beautiful thing, Lawrence explained, is that their forged will is actually beneficial to our case. Attempting to probate a fraudulent document is a felony. Combined with the murder charges, they're looking at life in prison without parole. When I returned home at noon, Brandon's truck was in my driveway. He and Vanessa were sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread between them, what looked like financial documents and travel brochures. "Thomas," Vanessa smiled brightly. "Perfect timing. Brandon and I were discussing a family vacation. We thought maybe you needed some time away after all this stress with David's estate." A family vacation. To somewhere with no extradition treaties, I suspected. "What did Lawrence want?" Brandon asked, trying to sound casual. "Just paperwork. He said David's estate is more complex than expected. It might take months to sort out." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Months? Maybe longer. Apparently there are tax issues, trust complications. David's investments were more extensive than anyone realized." I watched them exchange glances. Their timeline was collapsing. Brandon owed money to people who didn't accept excuses, and now their windfall was tied up indefinitely. "Well," Vanessa said, "we'll just have to be patient. David's been good to us all these years. We can wait a little longer." But I could see the panic in her eyes. They couldn't wait months. Brandon couldn't wait weeks. That evening, Vanessa cooked my favorite meal, grilled salmon with her special herb sauce. She was unusually chatty during dinner, talking about our early years together, reminiscing about happier times. "Thomas, do you ever think about what you'd do if something happened to me? How you'd want to be remembered?" An odd question. I'd want to be remembered as someone who loved his family. Why? Just thinking about David. How sudden it was. How important it is to tell people you love them while you can. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I want you to know how much these 18 years have meant to me. How grateful I am for the life we've built together." It sounded like a goodbye. After dinner, she suggested we watch a movie together, something we hadn't done in months. She made hot chocolate, another rarity, and insisted I try her new recipe. The chocolate tasted slightly bitter, with an aftertaste I couldn't identify. 20 minutes into the movie, I started feeling drowsy. Vanessa was watching me more than the screen, her hand resting on my arm in what would look like affection to any observer. "Tired, honey?" she asked softly. "A little. Long day." My vision was starting to blur. The wire under my shirt felt like it was burning against my skin. "Why don't you rest your eyes? I'll wake you when the movie's over." And then I realized what the bitter taste was. The room was spinning. Vanessa's face came in and out of focus as she leaned over me, checking my pulse with the practiced efficiency of a nurse. "How long?" I managed to whisper. She didn't pretend not to understand. 30 minutes, maybe less. The Ambien I gave you is double what David got his last night. Your heart should stop before you slip into a coma." Ambien mixed with alcohol from the wine at dinner. The same combination that had officially killed David, according to the forged medical examiner's report I'd found in the safety deposit box. "Why?" My tongue felt thick, unresponsive. "Because you're too honest, Thomas, too principled. When David's real will surfaces, and it will eventually, you'd have insisted on doing the right thing. You'd have exposed us." She stroked my hair with genuine tenderness. "This way is kinder. You'll just go to sleep, like David did, peaceful." I tried to speak the code word Oklahoma, but only managed Okla before my voice failed completely. Vanessa misunderstood. "I know, honey, I know it's hard, but think about it. You'll be with David again. You two were always so close." Through my blurred vision, I saw Brandon enter the living room. He was carrying what looked like a suicide note. "Is he out?" Brandon asked. "Almost. Help me get him to the garage. We'll put him in his car. Leave the engine running. Carbon monoxide poisoning will mask the drugs in his system." They were going to stage my suicide. a grief-stricken widower, unable to cope with the loss of his best friend, ending his life in his garage. But I could still hear them clearly. The wire was still recording. "Mom, we need to talk about the timeline," Brandon said as they lifted me from the couch. "My people are getting impatient. I need money by Friday. Or what? Or they'll make an example of me and anyone connected to me." Vanessa stopped walking. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you. These aren't the kind of people who accept payment plans." They carried me through the kitchen toward the garage door. My body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, but my mind was still functioning. I could hear Detective Reynolds' voice in my earpiece, so faint I might have imagined it. "Units in position, preparing to breach on suspect's signal." In the garage, they propped me up in the driver's seat of my Honda Accord. Vanessa was checking my pulse again when Brandon said something that changed everything. "What about the life insurance? How long before that pays out?" 6 months minimum," Vanessa replied. "But Thomas has a retirement account worth $340,000. I can access that as his wife within 30 days. $340,000. Not the full amount they needed, but enough to keep Brandon alive until the insurance money came through." "And then what?" Brandon asked. "Will we wait 2 years for David's estate to clear probate?" "We don't wait. We contest the real will with our version. I've already spoken to the forger. He'll testify that David came to him directly, that he was of sound mind when he signed our version." "What about the evidence David left behind?" Vanessa's laugh was cold. "What evidence? Thomas destroyed it all after he watched David's video. Grief-stricken man, overwhelmed by accusations against his beloved wife. He couldn't bear the thought that his best friend suspected the woman he loved. They'd planned for this contingency too. My suicide would eliminate the only witness to David's evidence." Brandon was quiet for a moment. "Mom, after this is over, I think we should leave town, start fresh somewhere." "Agreed. I've already researched states with no inheritance tax. We could move to Florida, maybe Texas." "What about Thomas's family? Won't they be suspicious?" "Thomas has been depressed since his retirement. Everyone knows how close he and David were. This will be tragic, but not surprising." She leaned down and whispered in my ear, "I'm sorry, Thomas. I really did love you once. But love doesn't pay for Brandon's medical school, and it doesn't keep him from getting killed by loan sharks." Medical school. Brandon hadn't been gambling. He'd been paying for graduate school through illegal bookmakers who offered student loans at crushing interest rates. Vanessa started my car's engine. Carbon monoxide began filling the enclosed garage. "How long?" Brandon asked. 15 minutes. The Ambien will keep him unconscious, and the CO will finish what the drug started." She was wrong about the Ambien keeping me unconscious. The adrenaline was fighting the sedative. I could feel sensation returning to my extremities. They turned to leave, but Brandon stopped at the door. "Mom, there's something I never told you about David." "What?" "The night he died, he called me, said he knew what we were doing, said he had evidence." Vanessa whirled around. "You never mentioned this." "I didn't think it mattered. He was dying anyway." "What exactly did he say?" "He said he'd figured out who was switching his medications. He said he had photos, recordings, everything. He said if anything happened to him, his lawyer had instructions to give all the evidence to someone he trusted." "Thomas," Vanessa breathed. "That's why we had to kill Thomas tonight. David must have given him everything." But as they talked, I managed to move my right hand enough to press the emergency button on my key fob. The Honda's alarm began blaring. Brandon and Vanessa froze. "Did you touch anything?" she demanded. "No, nothing." The alarm kept wailing. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. "Someone's coming," Brandon said, panicking. "It's just the neighbors responding to the car alarm. Stay calm." But through the garage windows, I could see flashlight beams moving across my yard. And then Detective Reynolds' voice echoed through a megaphone. "This is the police! The house is surrounded." Brandon looked at Vanessa in horror. "You set us up," Vanessa said, staring down at me with a mixture of rage and admiration. "You clever bastard." Brandon was hyperventilating. "Mom, what do we do?" "Shut up and let me think." Outside, Detective Reynolds was coordinating the response. "We have 2 suspects inside, 1 victim showing signs of drug poisoning, EMTs standing by." Vanessa grabbed Brandon's arm. Listen to me carefully. Thomas is dying from an accidental overdose of his sleep medication. We came to check on him because he seemed depressed, found him unconscious in his car. We were trying to help. But the recording... What recording? Thomas destroyed David's USB drive in a moment of grief. There is no recording. But I could feel the wire still taped to my chest. Every word they'd spoken was being transmitted to Detective Reynolds and her team. Brandon paced frantically. This is insane. We killed 2 people. We're going to prison forever. Only if you panic and confess. Stay with the story. Through the carbon monoxide haze, I managed to whisper, Oklahoma. Both of them heard it. Vanessa leaned down, her face inches from mine. What did you say? Oklahoma. Louder this time. Understanding dawned in her eyes. The wire. You're wearing a wire. She began frantically searching my shirt, finding the device taped under my arm. With one violent motion, she ripped it away, taking skin with it. 12 years of nursing, Thomas. I know how to find what I'm looking for. She held up the wire for Brandon to see. This is why the police are here. Thomas has been working with them all along. Brandon's panic turned to rage. He played us. The whole time he was playing us. And now he's going to die anyway. The Ambien's already in his system. Even if the police save him, the brain damage from oxygen deprivation will be severe. But she was wrong about the brain damage. The adrenaline coursing through my system was keeping me conscious, fighting off both the drugs and the carbon monoxide. Outside, I could hear officers taking positions around the house. Detective Reynolds was still trying to negotiate, but Vanessa and Brandon weren't listening. We need leverage, Vanessa said. Something to bargain with. Like what? Like the location of David's body. My blood went cold. What? Vanessa smiled grimly. Oh yes, Thomas. Your best friend isn't buried in Riverside Cemetery like everyone thinks. That's an empty casket. We moved his body after the funeral. Why? Because we needed to buy time. The medical examiner wanted to do an autopsy. Too many questions about the heart medication in his system. So we told them David had requested immediate cremation for religious reasons. But the funeral? Closed casket, remember? We told everyone his heart condition had made him look too sick for an open viewing. People believed it because Vanessa's a nurse. They trusted her medical judgment. Brandon picked up the story. After the funeral, we moved him to a location where he'll never be found. If they want to prove murder, they need a body for forensic analysis. And without David's body, Vanessa continued, all they have is hearsay. Thomas's word against ours. A grief-stricken man who destroyed evidence in a moment of emotional distress. The garage door suddenly rattled as someone tried to force it open from outside. Police! Open up! Vanessa made a decision. Brandon, help me get Thomas out of the car. If they're coming in, we need to look like we were trying to save him. They dragged me from the driver's seat, laying me on the concrete floor. Vanessa began performing fake CPR, her nursing training making it look convincing. Thomas, can you hear me? Oh God, Brandon, I think he tried to kill himself. But Brandon wasn't playing along anymore. The stress had broken him. I can't do this, he whispered. I can't pretend anymore. You can and you will, Vanessa hissed, unless you want to die in prison. Maybe I deserve to die in prison. Don't you dare fall apart on me now. We've come too far. The garage door exploded inward. Detective Reynolds and 3 officers rushed in, weapons drawn. Step away from him, Reynolds shouted. Vanessa raised her hand, tears streaming down her face. Thank God you're here. I think Thomas tried to kill himself. We found him like this. But Brandon couldn't maintain the facade. Looking directly at Detective Reynolds, he said, She poisoned him, the same way she poisoned David Mitchell. Vanessa's mask finally slipped completely. You pathetic little coward. I'm done lying for you, Mom. I'm done being part of this. EMTs rushed into the garage, immediately working to counteract the carbon monoxide poisoning. As they lifted me onto a stretcher, I managed to grab Detective Reynolds' arm. David's body, I whispered. Not in cemetery. She leaned closer. What? They moved it. After funeral. Hidden. Understanding flashed in her eyes. She turned to Brandon, who was now sitting on the floor with his head in his hands. Where is David Mitchell's body? Brandon looked up at her, then at his mother. Vanessa was staring at him with pure hatred. "Tell them nothing," she commanded. "Storage unit," Brandon said quietly. "Public storage on Highway 12, Unit 23B. Vanessa lunged at him, but two officers restrained her. "You weak, pathetic excuse for a man! I did everything for you! Everything!" "You murdered people for me, Mom. There's a difference." As the EMTs wheeled me toward the ambulance, I heard Detective Reynolds reading them their rights. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Vanessa being put into the back of a police cruiser, still screaming about Brandon's ingratitude. But even as my vision faded, I realized there was one more twist to this story. Something about the storage unit and David's body that would change everything I thought I knew about my friend's death. I woke up in the hospital 18 hours later with Detective Reynolds sitting beside my bed. The machines monitoring my vital signs beeped steadily, and an IV drip was flushing the remaining toxins from my system. "How do you feel, Mr. Mitchell?" "Like I've been hit by a truck, but alive." I sat up slowly, my head still foggy. "Did you find David?" "We found the storage unit. And Brandon was right. David's body was there. But Thomas, there's something you need to know." She pulled out a chair and sat down, her expression serious. "The medical examiner performed an autopsy yesterday. David Mitchell wasn't poisoned." The words didn't make sense. "What?" "No trace of digoxin overdose. No signs of medication tampering. In fact, the level of heart medication in his system was exactly what it should have been for someone with his prescription." "But the video evidence? The photos? All fabricated. David was never in danger from medication poisoning because David staged his own death." The room seemed to spin again, but this time it wasn't from the drugs. "That's impossible." Detective Reynolds showed me a series of photographs. "These were taken inside the storage unit. David Mitchell wasn't just hiding his body from us. He was hiding from Vanessa and Brandon." The photos showed a small living area set up inside the climate-controlled storage unit. A cot, food supplies, books, even a small television. "He's been living there for 3 months, Thomas, ever since his supposed death." "But why?" "Because he discovered Vanessa and Brandon's plan to murder him for his inheritance. Instead of going to the police immediately, he decided to gather evidence by faking his death and seeing how far they'd go." She handed me another document. "David's real medical records show no signs of poisoning. The video he made for you was completely fictional. He was never dying." So the USB was bait. David knew that if his death was suspicious enough, Vanessa and Brandon would eventually try to eliminate any potential witnesses. He was using you to expose their willingness to commit murder. I stared at the photos of David's makeshift living quarters. He let me believe he was dead for 3 months. He let me grieve for him. "Thomas, David Mitchell orchestrated one of the most elaborate sting operations we've ever seen. He documented every aspect of Vanessa and Brandon's plan to kill him and inherit his money, but he needed them to actually attempt murder to make the charges stick. So he used me as bait. He saved your life. Without the fake evidence on that USB, you never would have discovered their plan. They would have killed you last night, collected your life insurance, and disappeared." Detective Reynolds showed me transcripts of recorded conversations. David had the storage unit wired for sound. Every conversation Vanessa and Brandon had about their plans was recorded. We have enough evidence to convict them of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. Where is David now? Federal witness protection until the trial. What he did was illegal. Faking his own death, insurance fraud, filing false police reports. But his cooperation with our investigation will likely result in probation rather than prison time. I closed my eyes, trying to process everything. So my best friend let me think he was dead, let me marry his killer, and put me in mortal danger to catch criminals who might never have actually killed him. He saved your life, Thomas, and probably the lives of other potential victims. Vanessa and Brandon had plans to move to Florida after your death. There's evidence suggesting you wouldn't have been their last victim. A nurse entered the room to check my IV. "Mr. Mitchell, you have another visitor. He's been waiting all night." My heart stopped. "David?" "No, sir. Your stepson, Brandon. He's asked to speak with you before his arraignment this afternoon. Detective Reynolds stood up. You don't have to see him. He's already confessed to everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. What kind of reduced sentence? 15 years instead of life without parole. He'll be eligible for parole in 12 years, with good behavior. And Vanessa? She's refusing to cooperate, looking at life in prison. I thought about Brandon sitting in a jail cell, probably facing the reality of what he'd done for the first time. I'll see him. Are you sure? I need to understand why. I need to know if there was ever a moment when he considered not going through with it. But when Brandon walked into my hospital room in shackles, what he told me was worse than anything I could have imagined. Brandon looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. The cocky confidence he'd always carried was gone, replaced by the hollow stare of someone who'd seen the bottom of their own wall. Thomas, he said, sitting down heavily in the chair Detective Reynolds had vacated, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth. Which truth? There seemed to be several versions floating around. He winced at my sarcasm. The truth about why we did it, about how it started. You needed money for gambling debts. Your mother helped you plan a murder. That seems straightforward enough. It wasn't gambling debts, Thomas, and it wasn't medical school loans either. He looked at his hands, still cuffed in front of him. It was blackmail. The word hit me like a physical blow. Blackmail? 3 years ago, I was working as an orderly at Regional Medical Center, same place Mom worked. There was this patient, an elderly man named Frederick Carlyle. Rich guy, no family, dying of cancer. What does this have to do with David? Carlyle was in the final stages. The doctor said he had maybe a week left, but he was in pain, begging for it to end, and I helped him. I understood what he was saying. You killed him. I increased his morphine drip, just enough to let him slip away peacefully. It was mercy, Thomas. He was suffering. But someone saw you. Brandon nodded. Dr. Nathan Pierce. He was making rounds and saw me adjusting the IV. At first he said he understood, said he'd done similar things for terminal patients. But then Carlyle's lawyer started asking questions about the timing of his death. There was money involved. Carlyle had changed his will the day before he died, left his entire estate to a charity for cancer research, but his business partner was contesting the will, claiming Carlyle wasn't mentally competent when he signed it. I was starting to see the picture. If Carlyle died too conveniently after changing his will, the timing would look suspicious. Dr. Pierce panicked and told me he'd witnessed me administering a lethal dose of morphine. Said if the case went to investigation, he'd have to testify to what he saw. Unless I paid him $50,000 to keep quiet. Money I didn't have. Brandon's voice was getting smaller, more desperate. That $50,000 became $100,000 when Dr. Pierce realized I couldn't pay immediately. Then $200,000 when he added interest. Then $287,000 when he decided I needed to be taught a lesson about prompt payment. So you went to your mother. I had to, Thomas. Dr. Pierce wasn't just blackmailing me. He was threatening to report Mom for other things he'd witnessed. Medication discrepancies, patient care shortcuts, things that would have ended her nursing career and sent her to prison. The scope of the corruption was staggering. How many people were involved? Dr. O. Pierce had been running this scheme for years. Find medical staff in compromising situations, leverage them for money. He had nurses, orderlies, even other doctors, paying him to keep quiet about various ethical violations. And David? Brandon's face crumpled. David wasn't supposed to die, Thomas. That was never the plan. What was the plan? Mom was going to approach David as a friend, tell him Brandon was in trouble, needed money for medical bills, some story about a rare condition that wasn't covered by insurance. David would have lent us the money, no questions asked. He loved our family. But something went wrong. David said no. For the first time in 20 years of friendship, he said no to helping someone. Said he'd been thinking about family boundaries, about enabling people versus truly helping them. Said he'd pay for Brandon to see a financial counselor, but he wouldn't just hand over cash. The irony was devastating. David had finally learned to set healthy boundaries, and it had nearly gotten him killed. That's when Mom started talking about inheritance, about how David owed us for all the years of friendship, how ungrateful he was being after everything we'd done for him. And you agreed with her? I was desperate, Thomas. Dr. Pierce was threatening to expose everything if I didn't pay by the end of March. He said he'd make sure I was prosecuted for murder, that Mom lost her license and faced criminal charges. So you decided to kill David for his money? No, Brandon's voice cracked. We decided to con him, get him to change his will by making him think he was dying. Mom would accidentally give him symptoms that mimicked heart failure. We'd convince him to update his estate planning to take care of the people who'd been caring for him. But you actually were poisoning him. Low doses, just enough to cause fatigue and irregular heartbeat, never enough to kill him. Mom monitored everything. She's a cardiac care nurse. She knew exactly how much was safe. Then why is David dead? Brandon looked at me with genuine confusion. Thomas, David isn't dead. Didn't Detective Reynolds tell you? She told me he faked his death to set up a sting operation. No, that's not what happened. Brandon leaned forward urgently. David figured out what we were doing and decided to fake his death to escape Dr. Pierce's entire blackmail network. He wasn't trying to catch us. He was trying to save us. The room went silent except for the beeping of my heart monitor, which had started accelerating. David knew about Dr. Pierce? David was his next target, Thomas, and David realized the only way to stop him was to disappear completely. Dr. Pierce was blackmailing David? The heart monitor was beeping faster now. Brandon nodded miserably. For 6 months, David had been making cash withdrawals to pay him off, just like I was trying to do. What did Dr. Pierce have on David? David's first wife, Catherine. She didn't die in a car accident 20 years ago. The world stopped. Catherine Mitchell had been like a second mother to me in college. Her death had devastated David, changed him fundamentally. What are you saying? She died at Regional Medical Center. Dr. Pierce was her attending physician, and David was there when she passed. I remembered that night. David had called me at 2 a.m., sobbing, saying Catherine was gone. Said it happened so fast the doctors couldn't do anything. Dr. Pierce witnessed David giving Catherine an injection the night she died. Said it looked like David was helping her end her suffering from the cancer. Said he had security footage. David would never... Catherine had been begging him for weeks to help her die with dignity. The cancer was eating her alive. She was in constant pain, and David loved her too much to watch her suffer. Just like Frederick Carlyle, Dr. Pierce had been collecting these moments of mercy and turning them into weapons. So when Dr. Pierce started blackmailing David 6 months ago, threatening to expose what happened with Catherine, David had to pay. But David chose to fake his death instead of paying? Brandon shook his head. David faked his death to save all of us, Thomas. He figured out that Dr. Pierce wasn't just blackmailing individuals. He was part of a larger network. Federal investigators had been building a case against medical fraud at Regional Medical Center. How do you know all this? Because David contacted the FBI 3 weeks before his supposed death. He offered to cooperate with their investigation in exchange for immunity for everyone Dr. Pierce was blackmailing, including you and Vanessa. David knew we were planning to con him for his money. He knew about the medication tampering, the forged will, everything. But instead of turning us in, he worked with federal investigators to build a case against the real criminals. My head was spinning. So when David left me, that USB, he was setting up Dr. Pierce and his network, making it look like you'd discovered evidence of medical fraud. The fake evidence about medication poisoning was designed to draw out Dr. Pierce and force him to make incriminating statements. But you and Vanessa actually tried to kill me. Brandon's face went white. That wasn't supposed to happen, Thomas. David thought that once you discovered the poisoning evidence, you'd confront Mom and she'd confess to the medication tampering. Then the FBI would have evidence against Dr. Pierce for orchestrating elder abuse. Instead, Vanessa escalated to actual murder. David underestimated how desperate we'd become. He didn't know about Dr. Pierce's deadline, didn't realize we were facing immediate physical danger if we didn't pay. The door opened, and Detective Reynolds entered with two FBI agents I didn't recognize. Mr. Mitchell, meet Special Agent Sarah Brooks and Agent Daniel Martinez. They're here about Operation Medical Mercy. Agent Brooks stepped forward. Mr. Mitchell, we've been investigating Dr. Nathan Pierce's blackmail network for 8 months. David Mitchell's cooperation has been invaluable in building our case. Where is David now? Witness protection until Dr. Pierce's trial. But Thomas, he asked us to give you this. She handed me a handwritten letter. David's familiar scrawl covered both sides of the paper. He wanted you to understand why he had to let you believe he was dead, and why he couldn't warn you about Vanessa and Brandon's plan. I opened the letter with shaking hands, and David's words explained everything I thought I knew about loyalty, friendship, and the price of keeping secrets. But the final paragraph contained news that would change my life forever. David's letter was dated the day before his death. Thomas, if you're reading this, it means the FBI operation worked and you're safe. I know you're angry that I let you believe I was dead. I know you feel betrayed, but I need you to understand why I did it. Dr. Pierce wasn't just blackmailing me about Catherine. He was building a case to blackmail you too. He'd discovered that your father's death 15 years ago wasn't entirely natural either. My father, who had died in the hospital from complications after routine surgery, I'd never questioned it. Pierce knew you'd visited your father the night he died, knew you'd been alone with him when his condition suddenly deteriorated. He was planning to claim you'd hastened your father's death to inherit his pension and life insurance. The truth is, Thomas, your father asked you to help him die. He was facing months of painful recovery from a surgery that had already failed twice. You held his hand while he passed peacefully, and Pierce was going to twist that mercy into murder. I couldn't let him destroy you the way he'd destroyed so many others. So I worked with the FBI to bring down his entire network. Vanessa and Brandon were pawns in a much larger game. By now you know that I'm alive, that Vanessa tried to kill you, and that Brandon was being extorted by criminals. You know that none of this was really about inheritance money or gambling debts. It was about a corrupt doctor who turned people's love for dying family members into blackmail opportunities. The FBI has arrested Dr. Pierce and 12 other medical professionals who were part of his network. Vanessa and Brandon will serve time for attempted murder, but their sentences will be reduced because they were also victims of Pierce's manipulation. I'm sorry I put you through this pain. I'm sorry I let you grieve for me. But I couldn't see another way to protect you and gather evidence against Pierce simultaneously. When this is all over, I'd like to try to rebuild our friendship, but I understand if you can't forgive me. Some betrayals, even ones done with good intentions, cut too deep to heal. Your friend, I hope, David P.S., the David Mitchell Foundation for Heart Disease Research is still happening, but I've added a new mission, providing legal defense funds for medical professionals who face blackmail for showing mercy to dying patients. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is help someone let go. I folded the letter and looked at Agent Brooks. When can I see him? David will testify at Dr. Pierce's trial next month. After that, he'll be free to resume his normal life. And Vanessa? 15 to 20 years. Brandon will serve 8 years, then probation. Detective Reynolds patted my shoulder. Thomas, we know this has been traumatic. The FBI is offering counseling services for all the victims of Dr. Pierce's network. I thought about mercy, about the fine line between helping someone die with dignity and committing murder, about how love could be twisted into blackmail, and how friendship could survive the worst kinds of betrayal. 6 months later, I visited David at his new house in Oregon. We spent 3 days fishing and talking about forgiveness, second chances, and the difference between enabling someone and truly helping them. I never did figure out whether I could fully forgive him for letting me believe he was dead. But I learned something more important. Sometimes love means making choices that hurt the people you care about most. The David Mitchell Foundation now helps families navigate end-of-life medical decisions without fear of legal prosecution. We've assisted over 200 families in the past year. And if you're out there listening to this from your kitchen, your car, wherever life finds you today, Remember that mercy isn't always legal, but it's sometimes necessary. The people we love most deserve to leave this world with dignity. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we're afraid to have.